Good morning. As we get started with our start of the year things for this new school year, we are across the district. We are trying to implement backward design, and some of you may have heard this before, but we're going to kind of train as if this is brand new to everyone. And so, as we get started this morning, I'm meeting with all of our various administrators and curriculum folks are meeting with different groups, and so I'm here with you guys, and we're just going to work through backward design and do a little bit of very practical what that looks like for us. So the first thing I want you to think of to kind of help us understand what this is and why it's important, think of just a trip you've taken, the best trip you can ever remember having. As a kid, as an adult, you took your family, it was you and your spouse, whatever. Just think of the very best trip you ever had. Now, try to write one sentence that sums up why that trip was so great. So as you're thinking about that trip, you probably would say that you had somewhere in mind. There are certainly going to be exceptions. There's probably at least one of you that may have had a trip where you literally left and said, I'm not going to make any plan. I'm just going to go and see what happens. But for the most part, your best trips, you knew where you were going. And that's kind of the idea with backward design. And so I've heard this explained a lot of different ways, but what I like to think of it as is we're taking the students on a trip in their learning. And I, as a dad, I've taken my kids places where they didn't know where we were going. And so for them, it was a surprise, but I knew where we were going. And it's not just I knew my starting point and my ending point, but I knew some points along the way. If I'm going on a long trip, we, for example, will look at, what are the best gas stations to stop at with a big restroom and things like that. So you want checkpoints along the way. That's kind of how backward design works. We know where the students are going, where we're taking them. We know how to make sure they're on track to get there. And then from that, then we decide how to get started. So this is the kind of official process of backward design. You start with the end in mind. You start with where you're ending, and so you identify the desired results. This could be specific test questions. These are the questions they should be prepared to answer, or this could be it could be a little more general than that. But you definitely want to know what it is they're going to be asked and how they're going to be asked, and so you're planning to get them ready for that. Then step 2 is you're determining, okay, what is, how do I assess this? Not just what does that last question look like, but as I'm going, how do my formative assessments, these could be very specific questions. These could be activities that you use as just simple, informal, formative assessments along the way. Then once you have that, you look at how am I going to plan my activities and my lessons. Instead of what we had tended to do in the past is we said, okay, I'm teaching, fractions, and I like this activity, so I'm going to start from there. And then what happens a lot of times is teachers might start from the activity, and then they end up creating tests to assess based on what they taught. And the kids might do well, but the problem is you may not have been getting them ready for what they really need to be ready for. Now, one quick caveat. With all of this, we have to understand that we're Texas educators and we work under the system of the TEKS. And so unfortunately, we do have to have that as a main part of our ending point, which is where we're starting in our planning with backward design. And so you may in your heart of hearts say, well, this isn't really what they need for the real world or whatever that looks like. But what we have to understand is our starting point is going to be those TEKS. Now, that said, it could be that we're starting with a test or a testable item, or we're starting with a release test. We don't have to. The most important thing for backward design is that we do have to start with the end in mind, whatever that looks like. Here's as good a place as any to start. And so this is just one of the first couple of TEKS for 6th grade math. We're going to look at 6.1b specifically. And I could be using the TEK itself. Honestly, with true backward design, you do have to have the questions they're going to be answering So here we have a teak. We know what they need to be able to do. Now we have to ask, how do I check that they understand along the way? And then we develop those actual lesson plans. Again, you're going to want to have the questions that they're going to be answering, and you're going to want to make sure that those questions, for us, it's easy. We have the district assessment. We get it way ahead of schedule. So we know the level they'll be answering those questions. The TEAC helps direct us, but really we're using those district created assessments, and we're using that as our endpoint to start our planning with backward design. We want to make sure we understand. We may see those questions and think, man, that's a hard question, but that is the level they should be able to understand this material, know this material, and demonstrate their knowledge for this material as we get started. So practically, step one looks like we identify what are the results, what are we trying to accomplish at the end of it. And here it's you have students using a problem-solving model, and they're analyzing given information. So step one is they're going to have to be able to use modeling. They're going to have their given information, and they're analyzing that information. So that's what I know they need to be able to do, and that's kind of where I start. Now, you're going to want to have the test that they'll be answering as you start the process. You don't have to tell the kids, right? This isn't a thing where you say, here's what you'll be asked on the test, kids. Now just know this question is this. They don't need to see it, but you certainly want to be able to see the question so you know. And so I know on the test, I've got this question with the cars and the trucks. That's what I need to be able to get them ready to do. And so that's where I'm starting with my design process for this lesson. Now, step two, we're determining good assessment methods. So I know what the TEAC is. More importantly, I know what this question is. And so I see what they need to be able to do. Now I need to figure out, how do I check that they know what to do? For this particular one, there's kind of two main parts. They need to understand percentages, what that means, and then also how to show percentages with different manipulatives or with different devices. So as I prepare the lessons, I've got the assessment at the end. Now I've got to say, okay, how do I kind of have those formative assessments along the way? And so these are just some examples of, these are simple ways. From the circle, they understand generally percentage. From the two squares, they understand there's going to be different ways to view and show percentages. And I'm using something easier. I'm using 25%. Because as I'm developing that skill, I don't need them to do the more difficult 37.5% yet. I just need them to be able to have a general understanding of how showing percentages works. And so that's where I am with the step two in the formative part of development. And now step three, now I design the lessons. So only after knowing what the end result is and then knowing how to check along the way, now is where I start designing the lesson. Obviously, you guys have all the expertise in the world. You've probably done a lot of lessons. What tends to happen with backward design is it's not that you have to rewrite every single thing you've done. You may have to tweak some of the lessons you've done, or a lot of times it's just a matter of maybe you're doing a lesson at a different time than you've done it before, because you look and you say, for this test, this is what they need to be able to do. And so now I've got to kind of work backward from there. And I'm using this lesson I used to do the certain time of year, and it's a different time of the year, because this is where I can help them understand this. So one example I had is you could have, have them, if you happen to be doing this right after Halloween, it might be it should be about that time of the year. Have them, bring candy, and you can have them do different exchanges. You could have them, give half your candy to another kid, trade half of your candy. So they're seeing what half looks like. You could do, take 1/4 of your candy and put it in this bucket. And so they see what it looks like to lose or to get rid of half their candy. And so you can do kind of that moving around with a real life thing for them. And then also at the end of that, you can have them chart out, chart what percentage of your candy has chocolate, or what percentage is whatever type. And so now they're doing something with real world things, and so they're getting that skill and they're practicing the percentages part. So as we look at this, having done the whole lesson through the lens of the backward design approach, we kind of look back. The first thing we're saying is what's worthy of understanding. And again, we put that asterisk, we put that caveat. We know that as teachers in the state of Texas, you in this district are kind of being expected to answer that with the things that are worthy of the kids requiring understanding, is the TEKS and the things that we know that they'll be tested on. It doesn't mean we teach to the test, but it does mean that we thoroughly cover those things that we know that they're expected to know at the end of the year. So we start with that, and then we say, how do we know that they're getting those? And we add those checks through valid, effective, formative assessment throughout the lesson cycle. And then we go back to where we used to start, and we end with what learning experiences and teaching promote the understanding and interest and excellence. And so that's just where we say we know where we're trying to get them. We know how we'll be checking along the way. And so lastly, what do we do as we're starting a lesson to get them interested in what we're trying to do so that they're going to have authentic, real learning? And that's the overall idea of the backward design approach. We know that there'll be a learning curve, but we also know that you guys are awesome at what you do. And so hopefully you're able to see the vision of how this can help your students not do better on a test, but how it can help them have a better knowledge and understanding of the things that they're expected to learn in 6th grade math. So thanks for what you guys do. And I look forward to working with you as we look to really excel in this year.